So welcome.
and thank you for joining us, all of you out there. It's a great privilege to be part of this, and I have very much looked forward to this session. It's not often that you get to do something like this, so I hope the format works. I have now control over my PowerPoint here, and I guess that I can move on with it as I please. Is that correct, David?
It sure is.
Okay.
You are in
I'll
total
be
control.
talking. Okay. Well, thanks again, and let me just briefly say that education is tremendously important for all of us, as I guess everybody recognizes, while at the same time education is in deep trouble. Education is in trouble from within because the environments provided by education too often are not inspiring, not providing flourishing, and from the outside because they are competing educational ways of approaching life that are vastly more efficient in a number of ways. Take the whole internet scene, take all these fantastic talks you can hear on the internet, meeting the best professors in the world talking about the most important issues, and at the same time almost every child is acquainted now with computer gaming and online access for themselves, so they are able to create and design learning environments privately that in many ways are more efficient than the formal educational system. That doesn't mean that we should get away with formal education, rather the opposite, because there's a real risk of polarization and individualization to a degree that society does not any longer hold together culturally if we don't have an educational system that works. But so much the more important it is that it actually does so. And to move into the presentation, let me just briefly start out with some problems that from a human point of view are actually pointless. Also within education, there's basically too much experience of passivity. Passivity, it's good to hold your breath and be able to pull back and wait every now and then, but in itself passivity is leading to nothing but bad things. We are born active and need to be so. Too often we're not. Leading further to the problem of boredom. An enormous amount of young people are bored too much of the time in school. Now again, boredom is an important emotional signal, and there's nothing wrong with being able to sense that signal, but you have to be able to react to it. It's a signal telling you to act, not to accept the unpleasant for a prolonged period of time, and certainly not if you want to learn, because boredom is almost by definition something, a state where you don't learn much. Anxiety, the same thing. Of course, it's important to be anxious of something that's dangerous, but to be anxious for a prolonged period of time leads to illness, as we all know. We're good at being acutely anxious, but prolonged stress is promoting illness. Social tension is also a problem in school. Children too often are pitted too strongly against one another, so a large amount of children, young people, feel that they're losers, that it's actually a no-win game when they are in school. And too often the content doesn't make too much sense. It may have some legitimacy if you study the background for the curriculum, but often the young people learning the disciplines don't really understand why they should be doing that. And if we look directly at what meaningless discipline, the experience of being disciplined in a way that's not really have any perspective or leading anywhere, what that is doing to young people is actually undermining their self-respect and future perspective. So we cannot argue accepting that per se. And of course failure is, there's too much failure, and we all know that if you have too much failure, your self-efficacy goes out the window, and self-efficacy now in the big meta-studies of effectiveness in schools is about the most important single factor there is. So it's actually important for young people to have success or feel that they are successful almost on a daily basis in order not to undermine their self-efficacy. All this is leading learners away from learning, out of flourishing, teaching them helplessness if it goes on for a prolonged period of time. Now, what are we looking at when we study positive psychology? Well, one basic word that has an appeal to almost everybody is the concept, the word of flourishing. And here is a broom plant, a broom in the summer in Denmark, flourishing, and providing this metaphor for human growth, harmonious human growth. And it's interesting then if the hypothesis is that there's too little flourishing in school, based on what I just mentioned, it's interesting then to understand what is flourishing at core, what is it at root. And I want to submit to you that this is a pretty good definition of the components of flourishing, basically being two components. One is self-regulation. If we look at the broom plant here, it's clearly self-regulating. Nobody, no other organism is being the broom plant for the broom plant. It's being that itself. It's self-regulated plant. And it's also a growing plant, as we can see. Otherwise, it wouldn't look the way it does. There's an important thing. I sneak in here the concept of strength-based, of course, because that's a central word in positive psychology, but also because it has a more general application in the sense that all species in the natural world, all living organisms, by definition, have to some degree to go by their strength, play by their strength. Otherwise, they will not move on in evolution. They have to do what they are good at if they are to survive through evolution and make it through natural history. And I just wanted to mention that here because it's important, I think, to merge or synthesize the concepts of well-being and functioning, the concept of individual strength and well-being, if we are to get a firm grip on the problems in education and make education a flourishing place. Which leads me to a summarizing model here with some detail to it, but I'll go through it quickly, leave out the references, and hope that it makes sense. If we look at, imagine that we want to be educated, we want to understand the world at a deeper level. The foundations are, the foundation for this, based on what I just said, may be what we could term this way: satisfaction of basic needs for self-regulated, strength-based growth. Now, one reference I do want to mention here is a word of Ph.D. and Richard Ryan on self-determination. Those of you who know self-determination theory will know that concepts like autonomous motivation and self-regulation are completely basic and of essential importance to all flourishing in human life. So that's one direct psychological reference to be mentioned there, but there are many others, of course. Now, if we look at how this how satisfied needs are symptomized, what kind of symptoms we get from that, it is leading us directly to the types of well-being that are the components of flourishing, as proposed from health science, from PERMA models, from Martin Seligman PERMA models, from the work of Csikszentmihalyi and many others. And I'll just give my take on it here. So one way of feeling or experiencing that basic needs are satisfied in a way where you self-regulate and are strength-based is what we could call physical health. So physical health is something you experience when your body is able to autonomously maintain itself, get the food it needs, do something when it's tired, get rid of poison through antibodies, and so on. That's a definition that the health sciences are coming to now. That health is really being able to autonomously regulate yourself. Another type of well-being that we're all familiar with is what we call positive emotions, and typically positive emotions also occur when a need is satisfied briefly, when we eat, when we drink, when we have sex, when we enjoy a view, when we enjoy music, when we have these brief encounters where some need, some desire is being fulfilled, and we grow through that in a sense also. at least we maintain our body so that it builds or girds further growth. Then there's engagement, and engagement, of course, is this commitment, or this engagement in something that's really interesting, when it's really at a high note, where we talk about flow. And also engagement, of course, is a growth process, in the sense that, for instance, when children play, they learn a lot through that playfulness. They are clearly self-regulating when they are playing, and they are growing immensely. Like all other mammal species infants, all children of all mammal species on the earth today, and we have 5,500 mammal species, all their children play. They are all engaged in the sense that it becomes clear that if they didn't do that, they wouldn't learn enough. So engagement is clearly part of strong learning. Then there's a kind of well-being we call meaning, and meaning also has self-regulation built into it, in the sense that you have to endorse something, you have to endorse a person, a purpose, you have to endorse something that you aspired for voluntarily in order for it to be really meaningful. It also has strength built into it, in the sense that you do grow when you pursue some higher purpose and succeed with it. And finally, we have social relations as a symptoms of basic need satisfaction also, where it's clearly social relations come in many kinds, but the ones you really want are of course self-regulated. You want to be with friends that you voluntarily choose, that give you something, that you mean something to, and it's a growing process. It's strongly related to growth also, to be with friends and families and other people, because most new ideas comes from others, of course, and you learn from others, and especially in education, this is a critical point. It's also strength-based, in the sense that you want to be admired for something, recognized for something, acknowledged for something by others, and you will seek out other people who you admire. So basically self-regulated growth is like what you would find in a factor analysis if you were studying these different kinds of well-being, and looking at root. What is there some underlying factor actually defining all these things? And I submit to you that this is a good candidate. Now, why is this relevant for education? Well, apart from what I have already said, we could say that if a person, if a pupil, if a student, or even a teacher experiences these kinds of aspects in daily life, it goes without saying that life is interesting for that person also. And if life is interesting, you want more of it. And what does that mean? That means that you get potential energy, psychological energy, in the form of curiosity and an urge to act, being part of your experience. And I chose these two concepts very consciously because they are complementary, in the sense that curiosity is about, it's a potential energy to soak up more of the world, to understand more of the world, to get more of a grip of what's happening. So it's kind of inward. It's an inward energy, while the urge to act, of course, is more outward bound. But these two go hand in hand, complementary, of course. And if students and pupils are really curious and really want to use what they are learning for something important, well, we can be quite sure that learning will take place and creative processes will take place, and that the potential will come out in the form of success also. So you can expect high academic achievement, personal achievement, and you can expect creativity from those involved. And of course, this is intrinsically motivating. This means that you reinforce a desire to learn more and to create more, and we have a very nice energy cycle going here for education. Now, what is the physical, or not physical, the organizational principles then furthering this? Well, in order for physical health to come about, the science show clearly that nutrition is important for the brain to function, that movement is important, not only for physical health, but also for your mood. As you may know, 3 times hard exercise a week almost equals the effect that Prozac has on your basic mood. So this is another example of how you can attempt control of your own situation by simply moving. Sleep is important. If we don't sleep enough, we will be very likely in a lower mood the day after than we would otherwise be. Hygiene is important. What about positive emotions? How does a teacher or leader bring that about? Well, make sure to create a good social atmosphere, making it possible for people to concentrate and not be afraid and worrying about all kinds of other stuff than the content. Understand that the aesthetics are important, that beautiful rooms make for beautiful thoughts, and ugly rooms for the opposite. And note that functionality is important for need satisfaction also, because functionality means that waiting times are diminished. And even though it's good to be able to wait sometimes and to postpone satisfaction, it's not in itself a very good quality. It's functionality means that if you need to go on the web, it's good if there's a connection. If you need food, it's good if you can have some apples or something. If you need to go to the bathroom, it's good for your concentration if that's possible, and so on. So these are the basic preconditions I would submit to you. If we look at engagement, what are the preconditions for engagement? Mike Csikszentmihalyi very succinctly has shown that it's basically generally about these things, that we need a high degree of autonomy. You can't be in flow by the means of others. It's you who are in flow. We have to have goals who make sense also. We have to have a few rules that guide us, but go in the background so that they don't become the primary focus for us, meaning that they shouldn't become a big bureaucracy that's taking up all the time. We have to be able to have these flexible challenges so that we don't get stuck in boredom and don't get stuck in anxiety. We have to have ongoing feedback that is not humiliating but stimulating further inquiry, further activity. And of course we have to be able to concentrate. And if we look at meaning, what's the necessity for meaning? I would say that in the small scale, usability is a good candidate for one word that creates meaning. That means if children learn something in school and they can actually use it in the afternoon, they don't ask what the meaning is of learning these things because it goes without saying. They can see that. Also, on this larger scale, it's important to understand that if something is not immediately usable, you need good reasons for learning it in order to be able to find it meaningful. Otherwise, there's an educational problem already there. And finally, so good social relations demand at least 2 things that I would highlight here. One thing is that we have social support. That means that people help you and comfort you and go with you and support you, basically. But that support from others is basically comfortable or comforting. It's not in itself what really drives development. Much more so what we could call positive social challenge, where people actually oppose you in a positive way and criticize your idea in a positive ways and challenge what you do, just like in sports. Of course, we need both. We need somebody helping us. We need somebody challenging us. But very often, people think that only support will do the job when we need good social relations, and social challenge makes for conflict. It's very important to understand that, for instance, if we want true engagement, being in flow, for instance, you need a challenging situation where you cannot beforehand know whether you are able to overcome that challenge. So this model is a first overview for you, where I combine ideas about the basic self-regulating forces that drive us all. The discipline of well-being, the subdiscipline of positive psychology of well-being that we see here, the performance achievement part in education that we see here, which is what Marty Seligman is making a well-being point, calling achievement. But for education, I think it is better positioned there. And here are the organizational preconditions that I would highlight as the most important, the basic factors making this kind of well-being occur. And then one final point I want to draw your attention to here is that if this is well-being, if this is about well-being, note that it not only comes from success, it's not something that only comes after you have success and then we will feel good. It's also a precondition for success. So there's a complementary relationship in education, a very basic complementary relation in education between well-being and success in what you do that we cannot neglect. So self-regulated growth, I submit to you, is then the quintessential key to well-being and functioning well, based on what I was just saying. And we may then look a bit closer on what characterizes well-being and flourishing, and just reiterate this point that flourishing can be understood as self-regulated, strength-based growth. Now, if we look at the components of this in one more way, I would say this, and I'll just make this quickly. I was saying to you before that flourishing depends on a growth process and a self-regulating process, and that growth comes in the form of learning and creativity, making for well-being, and self-regulating processes came in the sense of this sense of freedom to regulate effectively, also making for well-being. And there's a very important thing, maybe one of the most important and most overlooked factors in psychology, and certainly in the design of traditional education, and that is this complementary dimension, that flourishing is not only directed, it is also unpredictable in detail. In other words, a good school should have some purpose, some direction, some rules, and so on. But it has to recognize that in order for there to be life, there has to be unpredictability in detail all the way also. And to give two examples, if we have growth processes in the bodies, for instance, then note that if we have the genome that is part of every cell in the body, the genome provides direction for the body's growth from the first day to the last. Yet how the genome is actually creating the body, how, for instance, identical twins end up looking, is unpredictable in detail. I myself have twin sisters, and while they were looking very similar at the age of 22, so much that we couldn't tell them apart if we took pictures of them. They couldn't even do that themselves. Today, when they're about 50, people tend to not even be able to recognize that they are twin sisters, because they led different lives. There's unpredictability when the environment starts to interact with the genome, which is identical for my and give identical directions for my twin sisters, but still make for very detailed and different results, for instance, in the way they look. And if we look at self-regulating processes, for instance, in the body, if we take that example again, and we look at the temperature of the body, and in Celsius, that would be 37.2 Celsius. That is something that the self-regulation of the body is clearly directed towards. Yet, second by second, we don't know the exact temperature of the body, because the weather changes. You may have a fever, you may have a cold, you may have all kinds of stuff. So there's this dance between directedness and unpredictability that is basically defining what is happening when we are flourishing. And a few more examples, illustrations of that. Here we have directed and unpredictable, and directed yet unpredictable forestry. And a point on top of that, where directedness and unpredictability are cognitive variables, you may say, is kind of abstract terms. There are emotional correlates to that makes it quite easier, much easier to understand, because we can suddenly feel it. Because what we see here, when we feel cognitively directedness and unpredictability at the same time, which we clearly do when we look at this forest, it's making us feel calm and moved at the same time. I think you can appreciate that if you look at this picture, you calm down in the sense that it's extremely relaxing to be in the forest, but it's also moving at the same time, and it's simultaneously so. And my point here is that, and this goes far beyond education, but I'll focus on education now. If you want a good educational experience, I submit to you that part of the experience is this simultaneous experience of being calm and focused and moved at the same time. For instance, reading a book, being completely relaxed and getting a lot out of it, being moved by the content, by the experience. Another example, and you can almost guess what I'll say, this is a moving and relaxing experience at the same time. This is from the Faroe Islands in the northern Atlantic. A wonderful view over these Lord of the Rings kind of landscape. You relax in the majestic nature that you see here, while at the same time it's an adventure scene that you just want to jump into and experience. So we have, again, this double or complementary experience of feeling calm and moved simultaneously. Some of you will begin to see the outline of a flow situation when I talk this way, and this is not a coincidence, which I'll come back to in a second. Here we are in Venice, in Italy. Again, you have the, if you look at it, you'll be able to see or appreciate, I think, that it's very relaxing to be here on the Canal Grande in Venice, while at the same time extremely inspiring. So you calm down while you feel elevated at the same time emotionally. It's a wonderful experience, and the reason I submit it to you is because it is good if children can experience that while they're in school. You may say this is never going to happen in school, but I will say they were able to do so before they entered school, because when they're in their play, in their playful state, before they enter school, their life in that state is full of adventure and at the same time fully focused. Otherwise, you'd not be able to be part of the play. And children know that. They'll even be able to tell you about those organizational principles for a play without using these names words before they enter school. So again, we have this complementary wonderfulness of being calm and yet sensing that this is a place full of life. And moving into the learning experience more closely, here we do have something that reminds us of a flow experience. And of course, completely focused, calm, concentrated, while at the same time experiencing intense fulfillment in learning about this dragonfly. Focused and moved simultaneously. This is what we want for our children. This is the way we want to do our studies. This is the way we were made by nature. We are designed by nature to be good at this, because it has always supported our chances for survival, that we were able to focus on something intensely and be interested enough in it to really grasp what's going on. Of course, this made for a competent ancestor in the Stone Age, and so it does today. One way of showing this in a graphic is this model, where you have two dimensions that are defining what we could call a growing organism, or growth more generally, actually, where this trajectory here is illustrating a growth process. And if something small becomes bigger, like a small human being becomes a grown-up human being, there are two dimensions here that play together, of course. One is that new cells come to it, new competences show up, new elements or new aspects of life are being added all the time. We may call that differentiation of the human being. While at the same time, these elements that come together are integrated so that the human being keeps his identity, keeps his possibility of staying one body, and so on. And if these two dimensions are combined harmoniously, we can state that this will be the result will be what we could call self-regulated growth, where you have a dynamic situation constantly regulating, while at the same time having a stable situation in the sense that you survive and you maintain your sense of psychological identity. And one more point to this model is that differentiation makes for more unpredictability. It's more unpredictable because something new holds this unpredictability in it, while the more directed dimension here holds for more calmness or more predictability. And as you can see, hopefully from this, it is a good combination. It's a necessary combination to have this direction and unpredictability also shown through this model. And the reason I want to show you this is that I wanted to prepare the ground for this model, with this basically the flow model, which many of you will know beforehand. But I have generalized it and elaborated it with some other words here because they go hand in hand if this kind of self-regulated growth is actually taking place. The previous model, this model, is a general model. It's a general model for self-regulated growth that you can use for bodies, you can use them for computers, for cities, for cultures, and so on. This model is a special case. The flow model, I would say, is a special case of illustration of self-regulated growth that is about consciousness. This is about the human consciousness. And as Csikszentmihalyi has shown many times, and he is the father to this model. I forgot to put him here, but it's supposed to say Csikszentmihalyi here. Also, this model is showing that if you are completely one with the music, if you are in flow, forget time and space, forget yourself, focus completely on the activity that you're in, you get playfulness and learning and creativity and even a high likelihood of social responsibility on top of that, all illustrated in the same model. And again, in order to have this kind of self-regulated growth in consciousness, there are two components that make for that, and if they're combined in the right way, we get this as a result. Here we have the skills, which are more which are known beforehand, you may say. I have some skills, and I'm confident that I have these skills. Therefore, I dare to take on new challenges. And here we have the challenges, and once we start to turn up the level of challenges, it becomes more and more difficult. The need for improvisation, of course, increases, because improvisation is necessary whenever you don't know exactly what's going on. So if we look at education as a place, a school or a university, at a place where we really want to learn something, there's very, very good provision for saying that we should optimize the number of experiences of flow, that we should recognize how flow goes hand in hand with children's playfulness, meaning that when children are playing, they're actually performing flow even before they come to school, and they are in their natural state of being. Indeed, a state of being that we long for, wish for, prioritize for throughout life if we are able to. So it's not an exotic. Flow is, in that sense, not an exotic experience. It's a natural experience, and it is learning rich because if we are in the flow state, you can see you have this combination of challenging your skills optimally, the meaning going up on your toes and taking on as much as you can. And of course, in this situation where you, for instance, have pupils who are using their talents to their best, at the same time being completely focused on the substance of what they're learning, is quintessentially effective learning. And you may say it is even creative to be in this situation, because when you are in flow, you are close to this line, or you, by definition, on this line, and that means, and this line could be defined as a line that separates failure here from success here. And of course, when you're close to that line, you will often transgress that line also, and making mistakes. And as we all know, this is not a dangerous situation to to fail and make errors when you're playing, or you are playing ball, or playing as a child in the garden, or even if we are talking or doing other projects. Often it's most fun when we are in this situation where we actually play around with ideas and try our best and fail every now and then. It's much more fun than if we know beforehand that we had succeeded. There has to be a little risk involved in what we do in order for it to really be fun for us. And that means that we prefer to be right here, right in this state. And this state is a creative state in the sense that if you are there and you make all these errors, you need to correct them. You need to learn from them. You need to be in a creative, innovative mode in order to maintain your position there. So we can expect a lot of creativity at the same time while we're learning. And of course, my final point will then be that if a pupil or a person in general is experiencing a lot of this, they will also, by that, of course, experience that this place where I am is good for me. My surroundings are kind to me. They are nurturing me. They are comforting me. They are helping me. They are helping me flourish. And we all know that if we have that kind of experience, we tend to reciprocate that kind of experience. We tend to assume more social responsibility through that, so we can expect good work at the same time. And again, of course, sometimes we're anxious and we have to react to it, but we can't maintain, we can't stay up here for a long time, because chronic anxiety makes for stress and serious illness. And boredom is important every now and then, but we should not maintain a position down here, because we underperform, we lose our interest in what's going on, and if we talk about education, this is a direct route to dropout also, because it is meaningless. It doesn't have much meaning to it. And going back to my very first slide, please note from your own experience and from the reports coming out almost daily, how many children and students report that there's too much anxiety and too much boredom in their educational experience. Here's really work for us to do. So to sum up, this model, the quintessence of effective pedagogy seen from the flow perspective implies that you have an intrinsically motivating situation, really self-regulated situation where you grow immensely because it's extremely learning rich as your skills are challenged optimally, while at the same time you're completely absorbed in the learning process. It's a creative situation to be in because it continuously makes small errors that stimulate further learning through improvised exploration. And one final point here, please note that social inclusion, the ideal of being socially inclusive, is very much undergirded by allowing pupils to be in flow much of the time, because the person is optimally self-sufficient and responsible in that process. I should then maybe move a little. Could I just get a comment on the time?
Well, you're doing great, Hans Henrik. I'd say another 5 minutes, and
another 5 minutes. I can do it. Okay, I'll just move on. Now here are the conditions, the general principles that Csikszentmihalyi, myself, and others are promoting in order to make flow likely in any setting, and especially relevant in schools. And I'll just line them up for you and read them without commenting very much, but ask you to note one thing. Ask you to note that each of these 6 points that come now, they both support top-down, in the sense that they support that the goals that you're striving for in education are actually met, that you're actually achieving what you're striving for. These principles support that. Yet they do so by optimizing self-regulated activity on behalf of the pupils. And there are huge meta-studies now showing that this is immensely important, that if we are to revitalize education, one of the things we need to do is to have children, pupils, students see themselves as teachers also, see themselves as co-responsible or even main responsible for their learning. So this kind of revitalization through a more active student approach is also supported by these principles. So it's both top-down, we make likely to reach the goals that we strive for in education, while at the same time optimizing flourishing in the sense of actually being in charge of what you're doing. Here are the 6 points. First principles, there should be good opportunities for voluntary initiative. You know, you should be at the driver's seat. You are the learner. The learner should be the learner, the main drivers of the process. But of course you have to be responsible for your surroundings. So this is kind of the top-down principle. This is democracy. This is for everyone. So you can't just do your own thing. Point 2, we should have goals, and goals are by definition top-down from the moment where you put them up. Even if you choose them completely without pressure, it will still be a driving, controlling dimension in your life once you have them. But there's no problem in that if only it's energizing, if only it's inspiring, meaningful, something worthwhile. The third principle, there should be some rules, but they should be unbureaucratic, as I mentioned in one of the first slides. They should not stand in the way of actually achieving the goals. They should be simple guiding principles, making things easier, and everybody works more smoothly together. Then there should be this flexibility to match challenges to skill, preventing people from getting stuck in boredom and stuck in anxiety. It serves no good purpose whatsoever to get stuck in anxiety and boredom. There's no psychological argument, I would submit, that you can forward in support of accepting children burning out in anxiety and boredom, even though it has happened a lot of times, for a long time. Then there should be this ongoing, clear, non-humiliating information about how one is doing. So you get feedback from the environment, but it's stimulating. It's not humiliating you. It's just invigorating you and telling you what to do and what not to. We all need that. Our sensory system, we may recall, is one big evaluation, a biological evaluation system telling us what the temperature is, whether we are in danger, and so on and so on. And it's, of course, a precondition for having a sense of being alive in the first place. And finally, we have to be able to avoid distracting factors in order to concentrate. These simple principles all support a school or an educational institution reaching their goal, but at the same time optimizing the likelihood for flourishing for those involved in the endeavor. It may sound exotic again to approach principles like this, but if you think so, please note that all children are actually able to live by them when they play, even before they come to school. And please note that these 6 principles are also part of the success recipe of a good computer game, of any sport, of any good learning and working environment you can think of. That would be my proposition to you, that that's actually the case. So summing up, I would say we're born free to learn and to influence or create our surroundings. We may assume that human beings have inborn tendencies to be active, self-regulating, growing. For education, this specifically means that pupils, students are basically motivated to learn. They are curious. They are not to be made curious, they are by nature. We can stimulate that, but still. They are basically motivated to influence their physical and social surroundings creatively. And they will learn and assume responsibility for influencing if necessary possibilities are provided. In other words, will be able to learn and influence unless inhibited in doing so. And concluding, we could look at two types of inhibitors that we really need to be aware of because they are very much explaining to us through the massive science on this that's already done why this natural tendency for flourishing that should be so easy for us to conduct as we are born with the disposition to be in that state are hampered or compromised. Physical illness, mental illness, of course, inhibits the ability to learn. Low mood, languishing, depression certainly are inhibitors to look for. Concentration problems, lack of perseverance, lack of willpower clearly makes for problems in education. Self-inhibiting thoughts such as low self-efficacy and so on make for problems. Lacking sense of meaning, curriculum that doesn't make sense, lack of perspective, lack of interest, or lack of interest in even succeeding in what is going on, of course, is a self-fulfilling negative prophecy, or make for that. And loneliness is extremely important. If you don't have friends, if you don't have love in your life, there's very little motivation to learn anything, because what for? And my point is, coming back to the title of the presentation, of course, is that positive psychology can help on all these accounts. I'm leaving out the references here, but you'll be able to see that positive psychology is actually opening up new ventures, new ways, new insights that can help alleviate these kinds of symptoms once they occur. And they occur everywhere in many forms, and we all know about them. These were then inner inhibitors, and my final slide, my final message will be about outer inhibitors, where we have the physical and social world around us, that also inhibit learning and influence. We may be in unhealthy physical environments. We may have depressing aesthetics, signaling to everybody in this school or whatever setting that's so depressing to look at that this is a discount place. This is not really very important. That is, we don't prioritize this. This is really a signal of low importance if you are in settings that are depressingly unaesthetic. Distractions, noise, all kinds of other distractions inhibit flow and other good things. Boring tasks that you just sit there. Of course, there are things that are not immediately interesting, but boredom in itself is less effective than engagement. So there's no reason to just stick around with it and accept it for itself, if otherwise possible. Meaninglessness, senseless tasks, so same thing. And then no-win game situations. Social no-win game situations where, for instance, you have pupils who never succeed really, even though they try and they try and try, thereby being taught helplessness, undefendable for any moral or pedagogical point of view today. And then these win-lose situations also that, of course, produce losers. And if there's a tendency that it's the same people who end up at the bottom of the pyramid, this has very little to do with democratic education. We have a long way to go there still. And then there, of course, social conflict. If there's tension, if there's weapons, if there's danger, this we know from positivity research clearly narrows our thought action repertoire. People start acting very instinctively and very unintelligently compared to what they would be able to if they were not in that kind of conflict. And again, positive psychology can help clearly, as you can see on all these areas. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you got something out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans Henrik. I can tell you from some of the comments already being submitted, people are ready to second my nomination is that I nominate you to travel all around the world to meet with every educator who's responsible for education and see if we can infuse this philosophy and these strategies into our educational system. So if all those in favor say aye. The motion carried. Hans Henrik, get ready and jump on a plane. We need your help everywhere. A really great presentation, and you did something also that sometimes happens too. People submitted questions, and by the way, we just got even more thank yous and aye. You know, they're supporting that nomination. A number of questions were submitted, and you did such a great job. You answered them as they were going. A couple stand out, and I wanted to share with you. Maria Lectrek asks, Hans Henrik, what schools are doing this? Are there any case studies that are available for us to look at?
Yeah, well, there are a number of schools in Denmark who try to work along these lines, but like in most other countries, it's this centralizing tendency that make many schools sense that it's difficult to live up to these ideals. But in Denmark right now, I was just on a governmental committee this spring, and we just submitted our report. And it's about measuring well-being in schools. And the kind of measurement that we use there, the kind of indicators that we have developed, so very much support this, because the rationality of it is so obvious. And it has become possible because the National Act of Education now is telling all schools that they need to think about thriving, that they need to think about well-being in schools as important as academic achievement. So this is actually a great breakthrough. But there are a number of schools who have gone a long way with this and are really successful in it, and I can give you names of these schools also if you're interested.
That would be great. Why don't you send that to us, and we'll have that available for anyone particularly interested in following up. They can email us at IPPA, and we'll follow up there. That's awesome. Another question that kind of goes back to earlier in the presentation, Hans Henrik, from Jody Fissler, says to this effect: given unpredictability, what constructs should we focus on in assessing well-being or assessing progress towards well-being? It may not be the same for all students.
Well, to understand unpredictability, it's and the importance of that, we can look at different aspects of psychology. We look at sensory psychology. We tend to habituate to anything if there's not some kind of unpredictability to it. If you rub your hand, for instance, you can feel it, but if you just hold your hand, quickly you adapt to it. If you eat chocolate, the first piece will taste great. The sixth piece you will hardly register. If you want a fruitful social situation, what really makes things interesting are people saying things that you didn't know beforehand. That kind of unpredictability. So if that's a basic understanding among people, among pupils, among learners, that we really have to surprise one another. We really have to understand that in order to feel really alive, we can not only be safe and secure and habituated to that, we need this kind of element of surprise also in all kinds of learning. That kind of adventurousness has to be part of the learning situation. And once people understand that, it becomes much more legitimate in itself to challenge each other. Of course, there has to be a respectful atmosphere and so on, but then suddenly unpredictability becomes the food for thought, the food for experience, the essence of what is really fun. And once they get that, I think it's easy to reconcile that with curricular demands and all these very factual and exact demands that of course come with standardized education.
That's
Hopefully
great, Hans
that
Henrik.
was it.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, very helpful. And we'll just, we've been asked to extend for 2 minutes. We'll do that. For anyone who has to drop off, we completely understand. We'll just finally ask, Hans Henrik, do you advocate that there really be a two-prong approach in the classroom where there is the embracing and integration of these principles in the teaching, but also the explicit teaching of well-being in the classes? Would you recommend both?
I actually would, but not as a symptom treatment. Hey, we have, like, it wouldn't be good if you have miserable pedagogy and then you try to teach them a class of happiness also, since teaching is not fun anymore. That's not the way it should work, I think. Happiness and well-being can be taught in itself, to understand what it is and empower the individuals to actually assume habits and tools and so on that make for a more satisfying life. But in education, of course, it should be synthesized with educational thought, in the sense that well-being and academic achievement or educational achievement should go hand in hand. That was the point in the spring water slide that I showed, that it's not, well-being is a precondition for, if well-being is something in itself, it's intrinsically motivated, but it's also a precondition for learning, and those 2 points should go hand in hand, I think, when teaching well-being within the educational setting.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Hans Henrik, I really appreciate it. And behalf of all of us who have been a part of the education system, or for those of us who are parents and have children going through the educational system, we sure hope that your message gets out far and wide. So thanks again for being here, Hans Henrik. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, David, for your great work, and